I chose to share this eulogy to honor my dad's memory. But how do you share the impact your father's 82-year life had on you, his family, and friends in just a few words? Well, by sharing a handful of memories that demonstrate the type of man he was. And if you know me, this is more than a few words. My dad taught me about hard work and the importance of education. He himself learned these traits from his father, who had only a fourth grade education and wanted more for his son. When my dad was a young boy, frustrated with school, my grandfather brought him to work site for the day to help build houses. This hard labor experience taught my dad to appreciate the importance of school. After my dad graduated from high school, he started working as a draftsman. It was his boss who encouraged him to go to college for engineering. My dad worked full-time while going to night school for 10 years, all while raising a family with my mom. He, like his father, wanted better for his 3 children, and he supported us as we went through college. My dad had a way of making people feel special through both his words and his actions. When I was in elementary school, he would pick me up and take me for ice cream and say, "Shh, don't tell your mom." I recently learned that he did the same thing with my siblings, Michelle and Darren. My dad learned carpentry from his father, and his love language was making gifts out of wood. From the trundle bed and dresser he made for Darren when he was little, the beautiful crib he made for his first grandchild, Harrison, and the bunk beds he made for his granddaughter, Abby. Then there are the giant doll houses he made for granddaughters Abby and Eva. He fashioned them after the Lake Murray house that he also helped design. My mom put together a photo album of many of his handmade pieces, mostly furniture and some toys. He proudly shared this book with anyone who would take the time to look through it, including many of the people he met at several stays in the hospital, rehab facilities, and at his final home at Terabella. His love of woodworking and spending lots of time in his giant workshop in the basement of the Lake Murray house ultimately would save his family and his dream home. My dad was a protector, always taking care of his family. It was 2014, the last summer family gathering at the lake. We were all in the living room watching Star Wars, except Dad, who was in the workshop in the basement. A big storm came through, and there was the loudest crack of lightning any of us had ever heard. We realized it was close. We got up to investigate, remembering Grandpa was down in the basement. The lightning had struck a tree in the front yard and somehow traveled underground through the gas line to the basement furnace, where it started a fire. My dad acted quickly on his feet, being a hero that night. He grabbed a fire extinguisher, put out the fire, and then later Darren and him turned off the gas. It was a scary night, yet had a safe and happy ending for our family and gave us a big story to tell. Another story about how level-headed and calm my dad was came from a video montage that Don created for my dad's 80th birthday. My dad's best friend from high school and best man at his wedding, Joe Colello, relayed memories growing up with my dad and on the bowling team that they were on together. Joe said other people would be upset and angry at bowling, but no matter how good or bad my dad bowled, he said he always stayed calm. Another memory of my dad watching out for us came from the early 1980s. We were taking a family trip to Campobello Island in New Brunswick, Canada, where my dad's mother's family was from. It was late, so we stopped in Maine to hole up for the night in a hotel. Dad went inside to check things out first in the hotel and decided it wasn't a safe place for his family. Later, my parents referred to that place as the Bates Motel. We ended up sleeping in our Oldsmobile station wagon that night, safe and sound. My dad had many joys in his life. He loved animals, much like his own mother. He always enjoyed visits from Michelle's dogs, including Cherry's many visits when he was in the hospital and rehab stays, and her final visit to see him when she jumped up on the bed and curled up next to him. He loved all children, especially his 5 grandchildren, Harrison, Aaron, Abby, Eva, and Lexi. He played Barbies and other games with these grandkids and teased them and chased them, enjoying fun with his nieces and nephews. When he was almost 70 years old, we found a picture of him kneeling on the floor with this plastic toy golf set, teaching his youngest grandchild how to golf. He also loved good food and sweets. Chocolates were an easy gift to give him. And whenever we'd go out to eat and were asked, "Do you want dessert?" the answer was always a resounding yes. My dad was also a storyteller and captivated his audience with tales of large fish, the beauty of the many golf courses he visited, or the cool cars he saw at car shows. So I'll try to make him proud by sharing one last story. I remember my dad teaching me how to play poker as a young child. He taught me to bet, and we bet with imaginary hot dogs. I have no idea why he chose imaginary hot dogs. But on the last day I spent with my dad when he was awake and alert, I wheeled him out onto the front porch at Terabella. We listened to 50s songs, him tapping his feet along to the music. He stood up, held onto the railing, and looked out at the scenery. I reminisced with him, standing there, of tales of when we stood on the dock at Lake Murray, watching young Harrison throwing rocks over the railing. My dad did not say much during the hour or two we spent on the porch that day. But before I brought him inside, I remember him saying that he wanted a hot dog. "Dad, you always said the first 100 years are the hardest. I hope that since you made it 82 years, the next 18 years and beyond let you rest easy and peacefully, that you get to relive these memories over and over again in heaven. And Dad, I hope you get that hot dog. I love you, Dad." So, why hire me to be a consultant for you? What is this all about? I do ask the OT, I answer some general questions for you, to give you information and support. And I can do even more for you on a one-on-one basis, knowing your personal situation, because every situation is different. All people are different. I've met so many different people over the years, so many different personalities. And so many different types of dementia, from early cognitive impairment or mild cognitive impairment that's maybe not diagnosed, to people with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, Lewy body, all these other things that can affect someone and affect their ability to function. So what can I do that other people can't? So you can go online, find organizations that can help you find a place, like Place for Mom and other places that'll research what's available in your area. Hospice can step in and provide you support in the moment. You can have social workers who give you resources and other things. And so what I can do, though, is in addition to that, I can help you find those resources to connect with those other sources, but also just walking you through the journey, whether you just want support for yourself because you're struggling and just feeling uneasy about decisions you have to make, whether you want more specific help. Like, I'm not sure. People, I've had friends, I'm not sure what my parents going on. These are their symptoms, and just helping to understand, helping to connect. I've given people recommendations, going to neurologists and other referrals, and just kind of guiding you through because unfortunately in the current healthcare system, everything happens so quickly and so fast, which is why I'm working on my pamphlet, Navigating Hospital to Rehab to Home, because there's not enough time. People do not give you all the pieces of the puzzle, all the information that you need to help through this period of time, which can be super fast. Things happen. You need to make a decision. You need to make a decision now. This is happening. This is happening. And you're left just scrambling. So that's where I come in. Wherever you're at in the journey, these are things that I can do to support you. So you can see me at Ask the OT. Check out Focused Healthy Family to learn more. Send me your questions, share your information, but also connect with me one on one if you'd like more information about how I can support you.
Hello, this is Don,
And this is Gina with Focused Healthy Family.
and this is podcast number 138. And today we're really just taking some time to reflect
Talking
and
about life and death in the memory of my father as I'm celebrating my 55th birthday, the day that we record this, and also the day after we had a service to say goodbye to my father.
it was a wonderful tribute, I believe, to your dad. And I thought, I went up there with you to support you because
I
you
told
weren't sure if you were going to make it to.
I told Don, yeah, I was like, I want to read this eulogy. I didn't know how emotional I was get. My emotions tend to come out of nowhere and I never know when they're coming. So I said, will you come stand by my side? I said, don't just take over, but if I look at you and I just can't talk, please step in and help me read this.
Yeah, I was the one that
I looked over at you, tears streaming down
I
your
think I
eyes.
allowed you to pull your emotions through me. Yeah, well, I think some of the things you said, like, well, that 100-year, that was a statement I probably heard from him. I don't know, a lot. He was just that was his go-to message when we were, I don't know, feeling down or all kinds of different
Yeah.
reasons. But and it when you said it, it just I could hear his voice saying it, and it was just it kind of went through me because he was, as much as he wasn't my biological father, he really filled in for a lot of the space that I had for our father. That because my father died when I was 17, so
And
when
we've been together 31 years, married for 30, and
yeah
he stepped in when we bought our house 23, whatever years ago.
yeah well he helped me tremendously because I remember the one of the things when we were remodeling the kitchen. He was at one. He came in and helped, but he also saved me from putting wallboard up because I didn't know how to. I'd never done that before. We had torn down that paneling.
Yeah, our house from 1969 had kitchen paneling. The paneling had just been put up over the beams, no drywall, and then over the years it had been wallpapered once or
Mm.
twice without any primer. And when we
It's-
intended to just take the wallpaper down and paint it, we decided it would be a whole lot easier to remove the paneling.
yeah, and then I was putting up the wallboard. I didn't know the proper way to do it. I would have done it completely wrong, and I would have put like I don't know if I can explain this well enough, but I would have put the wallboard right against the edge of the 2x4,
Right.
and he's the one that heard me say that, and he said, "No, no, no, no. You put it halfway through the 2x4 so that the other one can go right next to it."
Right.
Because he said, otherwise you're going to run into a place where you're not going to have a 2x4 to put it up on.
And I wonder, he told you to do that, and I didn't ask him at the time. But in most of our houses, he kind of finished the basement off. And so he did a lot of that himself and probably learned from his father. So I wonder if he made that mistake.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Hadn't thought about that. That and the other story that I almost wanted to tell yesterday somehow, but was the Tookie story, because that one he saved my rear end, if I want to put it that way. But
So they built this big giant house on Lake Murray, their retirement home, and he got a bass boat and we'd go out on the lake all the time. And one time
well, we were
gonna go fishing.
I had gotten a fishing license the summer before, so that down there you have to have a license to fish, and um, so this summer, the summer we're talking about, when did you think, when was that, about 2000?
I have no idea what year
It
that
was pretty
was.
early because I think Harrison was
Little.
still a baby. But anyway, so we went out fishing. He asked me if I wanted to go out fishing, and I always enjoyed fishing with him. Um, and we were sitting there in the water in the boat, and the Coast Guard pulls up, and they asked us both about our license, and I pulled mine out. John pulled his out and handed it to him, and he said, "You know this," and it had expired like 2 or 3 days before this. Not, and he said, "Do you know that your license is expired?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't realize that." And he said, "Well," and he threatened to arrest me because of that. And of course, for myself, panic went through my mind because, I had a baby, and they were going to arrest me and literally going to take me to jail. And I'm like, and first part of me was like, are you kidding me? For fishing, am I that much of a hardened criminal that,
You hadn't even caught anything.
yeah, I hadn't caught anything, and John was Mr. Smooth Talker. I think he could talk his way out of a paper bag. Um, but he started talking about this guy Tookie, who is like apparently a well-known, well-renowned character in South Carolina, and got talking with the Coast Guard person, and just talked his way through to a point where he basically said, "All right, well, I'll let you go this time, but I want you to go right now and go get a license before you do anything else." And of course, John agreed to it, and we did. We boated in, and drove over. I think we had to drive over to, I can't remember where. I think the marina actually sold them, and we got a license. But it was just kind of amazing because I was very panicked and very
My
frustrated.
dad's talked his way out of tickets before, and I could just hear him going, well, talking about different people. And do you know Tookie? And the guy was like, yeah, I know Tookie. And
Famous. I never met Tookie, but thank you, Tookie, wherever you may be at this point. They're probably up there with John now, I would imagine. But
did,
you saved me that day, that's
did
for
you
sure.
did you ever go fishing again on the boat with my dad after that?
I think I did.
Okay.
Not a lot. The tough part about it with your dad was he'd go really early in the morning.
Really early, it's just before the sun came up
Well,
and
like maybe 6 o'clock. I can't remember exact times, but and sometimes he would do it in like November, in the
it was
winter time.
cold and
And he had a speedboat. He had a pontoon boat, but they also had a speedboat.
it wasn't a
And
speedboat, it was a bass fishing boat. It was a professional
yeah, but
bass.
for speed anyway. It because it was in competitions and all different kinds of things. But anyway,
Yeah, it was
he
designed
would
for
get
that.
that thing going at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and freeze, like, oh my gosh, it was so cold.
When you got the speed going, it
Well, the
it
front initially the front end would be up, and then it would level out, and you would skim across the water.
yeah. And then when he went fishing, he had the trolling motor to
Yeah.
use for it. But yeah, it would skim across the top of the water. You'd be flying really fast. The wind would be blowing, and it could be really cold.
Well, and it would also hurt the back because you would hit these waves. bam, 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 bam,
Yeah, years later, he said, I think I know how I hurt my back. It wasn't all the golfing. It was riding in that boat and
Well,
smacking up and down.
and
But
when he first got it, well, there was also the story of the running out of gas.
so this was early on. He took the two of us out on the lake. I guess Harrison was back with my mom at the
Yeah,
house. And we're out in them. They lived on the Lake Murray spans like 2+ counties in South Carolina, and they were on the very western side, very rural area. And I don't know where we were. We were out in the
we're in the
middle of
middle. It felt like
nowhere,
middle of nowhere. Yeah.
and the boat stalled, and he couldn't get it started. And like we're out of gas in the middle of the lake, and we didn't know what to do.
Well, once again,
I don't even think we had cell phones at the
yeah,
time.
somehow the Coast Guard did come and towed us
So, or it was somebody he knew. Someone came along
and towed us
and
in.
towed the boat back. Then the funny part of that story is there were two gas tanks on the boat, and he hadn't learned all this stuff yet about his boat. And all he had to do was
Flip
switch
a
it
switch.
over. And he was upset. I think it was hot out there, but
Yeah, well, I
it
think
was
he
a
got more
fun,
embarrassed. I think
yeah,
he
yeah,
had a hard time sometimes with,
laughing at
things,
himself. But
laughing at himself, the things. But yeah,
we sure laughed about it later. And it was a fun little story because that was
yeah.
shortly after they moved in, and he was still getting used to. He knew more about his boat after that adventure. We had
Well, and he used to take us. Remember, we'd go out and look at the, what was it wrens or the
no purple martins. So it's
purple martins?
certain
Yeah.
time of the year the purple martins are like migrating or nesting or something, and it's like late summer and they just flock. He loved purple martins. He built this purple martin house. It was huge, and
Yeah,
it
he
was
had to take a crane to get it up.
he raised it up over the lake. Because I recently asked my mom, did purple martins ever nest in that um house? Because I know other birds did, and I'm not sure if they ever did, but he had it. He had like the duck house that was close to the water. He had lots of bird houses because he loved birding, and he
Well,
hated the squirrels who got into the bird feeders.
but I mean, the kind of just such a. We used to go out to where they nest, where they would, and it was such a wonderful sight. They would swirl, remember, and then land into the trees, and it was just a sight to see. And we would go out there every year. I tried when we were down they were living down there to go see that sight.
Yeah, that and going out sunset
Hmm.
cruise on the boat, the sunset. Usually this was all on the pontoon boat. When a
Yeah.
bunch of us went, the fishing boat had only so many seats, and the pontoon boat was a little smoother and had a covered area and little places to put our drinks and safer holding on to our young children who were usually on the boat with us. I got thinking today as we decided to do this podcast just about life and death. Um, Honoring people's lives, thinking about the last week of my dad's life. Um, and my sister came down um, for his final day, and my brother flew in, Pennsylvania to Carolina, and we spent most of the afternoon and evening. I had been there from late morning after I worked that morning at a facility just to help them do an evaluation and just spending that time together. My dad loved when we all got together. In fact, his last months living there at Terabella, we came to visit him more. And when he saw, like, especially his son and daughter from out of town, he'd be like, "Oh, we're having a family gathering. We're getting together." And he'd ask about everybody because he loved when we all got together and those family gatherings. He's a people person, and it meant so much. And so I want to invite you as you're thinking about your family. We're approaching holidays, and if you're caring for an aging loved one, we don't always get along with our siblings, the other people in our life. It's easy to be resentful if you're the one taking the burden and doing the primary care for someone and want other people's help. And there's either contentious relationships or distance, emotional or physical distance. Sometimes you're dealing with a contentious relationship with the person you're caring for, and they're resistant to your recommendations, and they're falling and getting injured, and they still won't listen, and they still want to live home alone, or they still want to drive their car, and they're stubborn, and they're um, just remembering that the relationships are really what matters the most, no matter
Mhm.
what's going on. If they're that stubborn and they're going to do what they're going to do, you know, we can only protect them so much. We
Mhm.
can minimize fall risk and hazards, but if it is their stubborn wish to stay in their house, do what we can to support that, make peace with it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want your last memories. I mean, do you? I guess is the question. What do you want your last memories to be? And, maybe they fall and it leads to their death, and yet they were able to stay in their home.
Yeah.
So they didn't have an extra year or months or whatever, honoring what's important, quality of life. Um,
Well, and what wisdom and lessons can you learn from it? You know, your dad. As we were talking about this, I was going to ask you, and this is kind of maybe put you on the spot, but what kind of lessons have you gained from your dad?
what lessons have I gained from my dad? I was trying to direct on to look at the camera into the computer.
Oh, yeah, well, we both have that
Still
uh,
polishing our skills, all these opportunities to do podcast speaking engagements we've done. I was nervous about going up in front of the church, standing up there on the altar to give this eulogy because I have a history of having anxiousness, real anxiety standing in front of a group of people. And yet, all this practice, I had such a calm. I know it helped that the pulpit was there and it was kind of
something
in
to hold,
front
kind
of
of
me, and didn't have to worry about the way my dress looked or anything. Um, and something to even rest on. But my dad was a speaker. Here's another great story. So we moved my dad in, and he was struggling and anxious and restless, and go to visit him, and it was usually a little tough. And one day I went to visit him, and he's in the dining room, and they told me he's been giving us information, financial advice all day, and telling us he called us all into his room to discuss some things. And we're getting in the dining room for whatever meal it was. And I finally figured out he was giving a presentation. He became a financial planner, kind of mid-career change. And this was the 80s. He would do seminars. I helped him when I was in college put the mailings out. He would send out information to people. They would come to speak. He would hold it somewhere where they had served a meal, and he would get clients that way. And I realized, oh my gosh, my dad's giving a seminar because he's standing up at the table. He's saying, "Does everybody have something to eat?" And my dad, with his Parkinson's, his voice was usually soft. It was hard to hear. He was speaking loudly and clearly. Do you like your food? Because if you don't, we can get you something else. We can do something different. And he's talking, in a room full of memory care people. So I'm looking at him and paying attention, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? And the next thing I knew, he's talking to me, and I'm just agreeing to stuff, not sure what I'm agreeing to. And I think I was supposed to be the guest speaker. And he's like, "Are you ready?" And I'm going, "Oh my gosh, he wants me to get up and speak." And I was just feeling nervous and jittery. And I remember I was like, "Let me go get something." And I walked into his room, and I was texting with somebody in the family and just kind of laughing about this and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be the guest speaker. And I don't, that makes me nervous." And so, when I was up there doing the eulogy afterwards, I was like, wow, I was so calm. It actually felt the easiest that I've ever spoken in front of a group of people. And I'm like, I think my dad was standing there with me.
well, like you said in your eulogy, that he did have an ability to be calm and patient. Um,
He
I
had a
think,
bit of a temper too, but he
well,
also,
yeah, that was kind of, well, I don't know if it would be kind of bipolarish, but
that would not be
yeah, well,
dual.
but you, yeah,
Edit that out, Don.
he could have,
There's no such thing as bipolar-ish.
uh, but he did have times when he would get mad,
Yeah, he
have
had a
that a
little bit
little
of a
tense temper.
temper and
But
could be moody, but
but I think especially towards
overall,
his
he
the
was
the
calm
years
and
of the Blake and all that, he was he was calm. Um, and I think that was, something that I admired out of him. He, patient about doing things. I loved it, his woodwork and what he would do and the caring that he 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 made more for everybody else, I think, than he did for himself with the wood stuff. I mean,
and
our
well,
house
that
is filled
was
with it.
gifts and giving away. My mom, I think, told me there was only one piece that someone paid him to do, and I think they insisted on paying him. But I know my aunts, we had a couple of my family members come to my house yesterday that unfortunately, my dad growing up in New Jersey, moving around throughout our years, them leaving Pennsylvania, moving to the lake, their friends and family are scattered about. And so it was a very small service. Yet my aunts who were there, we talked about some of his wood pieces and I showed them some and talked about how when my moving my mom out of the house, we're like, okay, we want to keep everything he made in the family. And it was like, okay, who gets this table and who gets that table? And my aunt was like, yeah, I think I have a wine rack he made. I'm like, yeah, I remember dad made wine racks for everybody one year. Everybody got this wooden wine rack. And yeah, and he was down there a lot as the story told about the lightning. I mean, if he hadn't been down there, I mean, who knows? Uh, uh, as it was, it took forever the fire department to come. They lived way out in Newberry
Yeah,
County. They only had volunteer fire departments. There was another house that burned across the street. The people had
almost to the
built it as
ground.
a summer home, and nobody knew it was on fire until later that evening. The neighbors across the street saw it, and it took the fire department coming three times. Finally, the city fire department came out to really make sure it was out.
I'm thinking about you talk about woodwork and the your father was cremated, and in the church they had his ashes in a wooden box that was very much in the style of what I believe your dad would have done if he had made that himself.
And you talked to somebody was it the priest that told you?
That somebody in the parish actually made them for the church. But I think it was a bit of your father's touch there, uh, somehow maybe a message of that he's okay, by the fact that any other time, any other church or any other place, you may have gotten just a brass urn or something like that. And it was kind of interesting. I thought that was kind of neat that it was a box that looked very much like even I noticed on, and this is kind of a little picky, a little detail, but on the back was this gold hinge, a long hinge. Well, if you notice on our gate out there, the same kind of hinge, that gold, exact same thing that I got from your dad, his workbench.
Oh, wow.
So just those little similarities that your dad's touch was there.
Felt his presence there for
Yes,
sure.
yeah.
Is the first time, I guess, that I went to a funeral where someone was cremated. And we were talking yesterday, Don, and it felt so much lighter.
Mhm.
Something about walking the casket up with the body. We if we believe in life after death in any form, or even if we don't, that the person's no longer there, right? Their spirit, their soul, it's no longer there. This is just the body that they used while they were here on earth. And there's always a heaviness about it. And it felt lighter. I mean, my dad had suffered for years. And in the past couple, especially, the past year or more, he would ask, "Why am I still here?" He got to where
Mhm.
he couldn't play cards anymore, which was the most difficult thing. Maybe 3 years ago, he was teaching the kids to play blackjack, betting with poker chips. And then it got where we were playing cards and he wasn't always following the rules. And finally, I got out some Uno cards, knowing that would be simpler for him to follow between his vision and cognitive impairments. But he would mess up sometimes. It was like playing with a young child. Sometimes I'd point it out and sometimes would just let him win. And then when he just didn't even have the interest or the ability to follow that, that was tough.
Mm.
As he had so many hobbies and yet so many of them were physical between golf, woodworking, fishing, all these things that Parkinson's and his,
Like his cars. Yeah.
yeah, driving a sports car.
Yeah.
Um,
Still wanting that up to probably 6 months ago, really still wanting that Corvette and all
yeah,
that,
he brought it up. So, it was a freeing, the fact that we could all be there that day. Um, he slept the past 3 days before he passed, and it was tough being there in his final hours because the lungs literally are filling up with fluid, and they told me it was a rattle, and it's a loud noise, at least it was for him. And yet, the peace knowing he wasn't suffering anymore. He wasn't struggling to walk, to stand. And kudos to Trellis Hospice. I'm planning to interview someone from a hospice
Um,
company for a podcast before the end of the year. I'm hoping to do this, because a good hospice company can really provide good support. You know, we were worried, the hospice nurse had been there, but then we were like, is he suffering? And we called, she came out within 15 minutes, and talked to us some more, changed his medicine that he was getting. And, they provided good support um, to us in answering our questions. I remember the first time I just had so many questions for the hospice nurse because in my 30 plus years as an OT, I work on rehab with people. I've worked with people who were cancer and even dying, but once they make that decision to go to hospice, Medicare doesn't pay for therapy services anymore. And so I'm step out of the picture. And so I never had the experience of that piece. I never had that. I I've never been there when anyone passes. I've never walked into a room and someone had passed. Working in geriatrics, that's a strong possibility. Um, and so I had so many questions, and it was such a comfort to me to get answers from those questions. The chaplain came out one time. It was just me there sitting with my dad, and I told him stories about my dad, and he was just so comforting. I learned his wife was an occupational therapist, and we talked about the beauty of occupational therapy and how it really could be helpful in the hospice setting. These are things I feel determined to advocate for because occupational therapists, one area we work on is positioning. And someone who is no longer can move or get up, they can get bed sores. And positioning and turning and using different pillows and things to relieve pressure is so important. Otherwise, it causes more discomfort and pain. And there's just other areas like that we could support someone in the dying process, just like we support them coming into the world, into this life. I had a couple people recently talk about death doulas. They didn't know the name of it, and I knew the name of it. Um, we hire a birth doula to support us. Yes, we can have our partner be there to support us when we're giving birth, but they're emotionally got
yeah.
their own stuff going on, and this doula comes in and their knowledge of birth and trusting in the body and having that support, and hospice provides that, and that's what a death doula can do. And we were there holding my dad's hand, and
And talking so kindly to him and so passionately to him. I was really they even though he wasn't communicating those last 3 days, he was sleeping. They would still talk to him, and they get down close to him and whisper, almost like whisper, talk into his ear. And well, and even things like they put those foot sponge, the like a foam around the foot. We don't think about that, but but especially with their dad, he was
they're called
stiffening up.
heel protectors to
Yeah,
relieve pressure.
that
Yeah.
that they tend to push down on their feet, you know, and they get sores. Little things like that that are very that make it kind of special. And like I said, the way they treated him and talked to him, and like you said, they when she rolled him over because they didn't want the bed sores, even
Oh
when he
yeah, the
was,
nurse came to, and she insisted on bathing him the last 2 days. And I remember she asked the staff for help, and they're like, "Well, you just gave him a bath yesterday." And she's like, "Yeah, but he's sweaty, and I want to help clean him up." And she got staff members in there because I said I would help, but and they cleaned him up, changed his clothes, and then I was told she did the next same thing the next day.
um,
Yeah, we kept getting reminded that the hearing is the last thing to go with someone who's dying. And, working with people who've been comatose or you don't know how alert they are, I always feel it's important to talk to people, tell them
mhm.
what you're doing. I advocate for this. I advocate for my patients to tell staff this because sometimes, staff, they've got 10, 15 people in their hall and they've got to clean people and change them and get their food and bring them their water and do all these caring things. And they sometimes forget to just say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And it's easy to think, oh, this person's asleep or they don't understand. And one of my dad's last stay in rehab, which is at this new local facility, um, he was on a program to get changed every 2 hours because he was having incontinence. And I didn't know they were coming in at night every 2 hours to check on him and change him. Well, this young, sweet nursing assistant had come in apparently in the middle of the night to change him and woke him up. And my dad would have these dreams that felt like real to him and often scary things happening. So she comes in the room and he threw a fit. I guess she tapped on his shoulder and she said, I woke him up to tell him what I'm doing. I'm like, well, that was good. And I later asked them, don't wake him up in the middle of the night if he's sleeping. But he threw a fit. Apparently he screamed,
Oh,
rape.
didn't he even smack her? One of the
That was at
times,
the
oh,
hospital.
okay.
That was at the hospital.
I don't mean to tell tales on your dad on that one, but
No, but
there
and
was that.
they
Well, it was a response because that.
because I came in later, I talked to them about it, and they weren't upset about it. And I said, yeah, I think he was startled. He didn't know what was going on. He was confused. Um, so I advocated for him and I talked to the staff. I said, I love that you're changing him and you're checking on him. But if he's sleeping, let's not wake him up to change him. It'll be okay for another couple hours. Um, Especially knowing how his dreams can be and how real they feel. Even when he wakes naturally from it, sleeping, he would think something was happening, and it was often something fearful, somebody was getting hurt, something, his paranoia, his those fears that came about with his dementia, some of them really precipitated by the Parkinson's medicine that can actually cause some cognitive issues. Which is we talked about this in another podcast with medications that we had to actually cut back his Parkinson's medicine a couple of years ago. He was very mobile and would be jumping up and running away and increasing his fall risk, but also his agitation. So we had to tailor them back a little bit. So he was a little less mobile, and yet it calmed, um, some of those issues. He still had them at times. He still had delusions, but at other times, he knew what was going on. He was alert and aware other times. And that's something that even with any type of dementia, people don't realize that just because someone has dementia, it doesn't mean they're completely gone. It doesn't mean they don't know what's going on. It doesn't mean they don't know who people are, even if they can't speak. My dad had some word finding deficits. You see this often with people who've had strokes as well. He knew what he wanted to say, but he would say the wrong words. And because I work in this area, and I know my dad, I could know what he was trying to say something, but it was coming out funny. And other times he could have a clear conversation. Um, when he was at a rehab facility in Charlotte not that long ago, I found out later that he worked with the speech therapist who also works at a place I work at in Charlotte. And she goes, I didn't know that was your dad. He was one of my favorite people. And I saw her Saturday when I worked and told her he had passed. And she's like, he was one of my favorite patients. And this is a woman older than me who's been a speech therapist for a long time. It's like we had great conversations. And he told her, about things, his woodworking, his family. And, she took the time and engaged with him because she was kind of assessing not only his swallowing ability, but his cognition and following directions and for his safety and things. And, those personal touches, the people that you know, gave my dad a hug, goofed around with him, teased him a little bit at Terabella and other places where he lived or he went to rehab, and just, remembering how important those relationships are, remembering to stop and make room for that, to think about what matters. We had family come to the house and you helped me clean up because I worked the weekend. And it wasn't perfectly neat, and we still didn't have our pictures on the wall. And it's okay. We had the people here, which is what I wanted. I wanted the other places we were going to have the reception after the funeral were not available. And so it was kind of by default. And I stepped in. I said, I want this. I want this to happen here. I want to have like a christening of my home of memories shared by family about my dad. And it just feels so full to me. And it makes this 55th birthday of mine where I've said, I keep saying goodbye, but it's not really goodbye. I've said,
Well, I think it was a long journey to goodbye.
yeah. And I've said, farewell or release to my dad, but it just feels so strongly that he's here with me. And so I leave you with those thoughts as the cat jumps on my leg. My dad loved animals,
Ouch.
as I said this earlier. And just really thinking about that, thinking about relationships as you navigate your life, whether you're caring for a child or a loved one, visiting family members, people you don't always get along with, people you have different political opinions with, um, to remember the relationship, finding those areas of connection, finding those areas of commonality, even if it's another person. Maybe you like nothing about this person, but you both love your grandfather, your aunt, somebody, finding those areas of connection, because in the end, I think that's what's most important.
Well, and that's our podcast for today. We hope you've enjoyed it. Keep in mind that if you're going through this journey too, maybe you're in the middle of it for yourself, or you've been to the journey's end, and you want to tell that story, or you want help with that story, that's what we're here for. Gina can consult with you, help walk you through that journey, through the questions and the concerns and all that you may go through in dealing with a loved one who's aging and in this kind of place. Um, so you can, if you liked our podcast, please leave us a like wherever you're listening to it at. Pass it along to somebody that may be going through this. Share it. And you can find out more about us by going to our website, focusedhealthyfamily.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok.
We're
And
on YouTube. If you're listening to this podcast, we have other things on YouTube as well as airing all of the podcasts. That's where we also do our Ask the OT a couple times a month. And again, you can hear this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. So be sure to like it and share it, because you never know, even if the person you share it with isn't in the situation, they know somebody who is.
yeah, and if you need to know the dates of those Ask the OTs, you check out on the website, along with my monthly EFT tapping group sessions that I do for free. All those schedules are up there on the website. And remember, how you speak to your children and your family today shapes their future and yours.